So years ago, when Avengers Endgame was coming out, I was excited beyond words. And I went through and recorded a review for every single MCU project up until that point, from Iron Man all the way up to Captain Marvel and everything in between. And I did it for the channel, and no one gave a shit, and I didn't care because I was just watching them anyways, prepped. And then after that, because no one cared, we stopped. And they're not horror,
Yeah.
and there's no reason to do them. And I even did that with like the Last Jedi and stuff. Like I was trying to tiptoe out and see what people cared about and what they didn't. It's a horror channel, so we need to stick to the horror. But now with Agatha all along,
Yeah.
um,
They cross
I
paths.
felt like there was enough horror in here to justify the discussion, and I knew Kaylee would be happy with that, since this is probably the most excited I've seen her for a show this year when it came to like episode to episode, week to week.
Yeah.
Usually when we have to put on new episodes of shows, her excitement levels can vary on that, especially if something like Grotesquerie or Teacup or whatever, which we'll get to. But with this one, it was always like she was more on the ball with it, like being like, it comes out tomorrow, like, and then be like, try to put something on, and because the show came out at a certain time, we try to watch something. She'd be like, yeah, but we're gonna be watching, like, we're gonna have to pause this in the middle because that drops, at this time. So, um,
Yeah.
this was definitely the most excited I've seen for you for a show in
Hmm.
in a while. Even more so than From. So
Yeah.
yeah, that made me go, okay, we got to talk about this. With it having all the horror elements that it does throughout, and you loving it so much. I think that everyone wants to hear your thoughts. So I'm going to let you lead this one and have at it.
Well, yeah, I guess for like some background, I'm not like a giant Marvel fan, I
Mm-hmm.
would say. I enjoy the Marvel movies and like shows that we've watched together. And I totally understand like the fandom and the obsession for people, but there's never really been anything that's gotten like super has gotten me very excited. Superheroes in general, I kind of get like, I don't know, they're just not my thing.
Sure.
But this is a little different because it's like obviously in the Marvel like cinematic universe, but it's about witches. And it doesn't really feel like a Marvel show to me
No.
because the only character I think, well, there's a few obviously, but like, Agatha from WandaVision, which is like where you would recognize her from. And I'm sure she's probably also in like comics and stuff that I don't know about. But at any rate, I just thought that this was such a fun and like wonderful show. I think a big part of it is just everybody's performance, especially Catherine Hahn. I think she just does such a great job as Agatha, and I really like that we get this entire like season to see more of her in that role.
Yeah.
And then everybody else too, because there's other witches that are in the show. I love all of those actresses and their performances. There's a character named Teen that also does a great job, that actor. And I don't know, I love there's like kind of a gimmick a little bit to each episode because they get into different trials throughout this like journey that they're on down the witch's road. And I really like that like each episode, the trial is kind of like a new aesthetic or a new like gimmick, really. And so they all have like different like outfits and looks to them, and they're in these new settings, and it's very theatrical too, which I think is also why I really loved it. So yeah, I don't know. I just had so much fun with it. I thought it was like super intriguing. I really like the horror aspects to it. There's a character arc and relationship that happens in the show and is like, has a thing at the end that I also like super super loved. But I don't want to talk about too much because of spoilers. But Aubrey Plaza plays a character in this that like she's just so great as, and there's a really cool look to her character as well.
So we're not going to get like deep into the spoilers in the show, because that could warrant a whole video for like each episode if we
Yeah.
if we really wanted to get into them. I think we should talk spoilers, but
Okay.
in a minute, if you are just kind of like on the fence about the show, if you're not really into um, the MCU or superheroes or whatnot, and you're feeling like, well, I mean, this is like the 30th project in the MCU, and like, how connected is it, and is it really worth my time, and like, what's it like, and am I going to be lost from the things that have happened before, or is this something that's going to be intriguing to me? Um, so the things I would say on that is, number one, this is like a spin-off to WandaVision, kind
Yeah.
of first and foremost. As far as its like overall connections to the MCU, uh, they're fairly mild. While there is connections to both WandaVision as well as Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, those would be kind of the two required viewing things that I would
Sure.
suggest.
Yeah.
If you were like, I need some context, I feel like I'm gonna be a bit lost.
Yeah.
WandaVision for sure.
Yeah, definitely
Doctor
WandaVision.
Strange, if you really want a little more added context to Wanda and what happens, because there is some mention of stuff that happens to her in this. So if you are curious on like what happens to her after WandaVision, that but I feel like WandaVision would definitely be required viewing
Yeah, I
for
agree.
this. But outside of that, do I think you need to watch anything else? I mean, sure, there's added context between Wanda, anything with Wanda and Vision,
Right. And
is gonna
some other
add
stuff.
something to this, but
Yeah.
not a ton. I just think that I think absolutely for sure WandaVision is a must.
Yeah.
Doctor Strange is a
Like if you're
like
liking,
iffy, like, yeah,
if you're
if you're
into
digging
it,
it,
because like that's the other thing too, is that one of the good things about the Marvel universe is that there are so many different types of like superheroes, and
sure.
Wanda is another witch character, and even like Doctor Strange, like if you know any, like he's very like wizardy kind of, so it's like not the typical like Iron Man or like that type of, Captain America maybe is not your thing. I think that the more mystical elements of these, heroes, there's definitely something that appeals more to me versus the like, techno brute strength or whatever that some of the other heroes have. So yeah, and WandaVision especially is a really, really fun and like very cool show
It
as far
also
as like an MCU show goes.
it also has a very similar tone to
It
this show,
does,
right?
yeah.
There's a playfulness to things. If I was to compare this to anything, I would say this show kind of reminds me of a mix between Hocus Pocus
Hmm.
and the escape room movies,
Hmm.
especially
Yeah.
the first escape room.
Yeah.
This feels very like the structure of the show feels like the escape room movies once they hit the witch's road.
Yeah.
Every episode is like a new escape room,
Mm-hmm.
but instead of them having to try to solve the puzzles of the room as humans, they have to try to solve the puzzles of the rooms as witches.
Yeah, I love that.
And because they're set in different time periods, you get a different flavor every episode that makes everything feel kind of fresh
Mm-hmm.
and unique, because it doesn't become repetitious.
Yeah.
There is some connections to the MCU overall, for sure. But I think this is the time where we get into the spoilers of the show. We're not going to get too deep into things, just kind of so that Kaylee can talk more freely. I can talk more freely about things and what we liked and what we and I don't think there's anything you didn't like.
No,
Um,
there's nothing.
but the amount of times that not only within the show but since the show that I've heard the Down Down the Witch's
Down,
Road
down, down
song from
the road,
Kaylee,
down
whether
the
she's
witch's
singing it
road.
or she's playing it in the car or it's played in this show about 18 times.
With different
Um,
variations too. Like that's
yeah,
also what's fun. I mean,
yeah.
it's a great song. It's it's like kind of acapella-y, and I love it. Catherine Hahn is obviously like a musically trained actress. She's in I think her fair share of Broadway productions, and she was in the, I'm pretty sure, Broadway showing of Wicked as Elphaba, the Wicked Witch.
Yeah.
And so that's really good. But she's got a fantastic voice.
Yeah.
And I think the other actresses that also sing with her, I don't know if it's their voices or I don't know. But anyway, it was I think it's just great to like showcase that talent of hers. And yeah, it's a very catchy song. So, and I think it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any criticism of the show. There's not really anything that I didn't like or didn't understand or found to be like annoying or boring or anything like that. So,
If you're super, super into witches,
yeah.
then this is going to be a show for you for sure. Like if you really like the lore of witches and you like more playful, fun
Mhm.
witchy stories, like the Hocus Pocuses and
Yeah,
such, you're
it's
gonna love this.
sort of stereotypical witchy stuff, like pop culture witchcraft. But I think that that's really fun because we've talked about on the channel with a lot of different films this year about witchcraft and about witches that we always want to see more witch horror. And
Absolutely.
this isn't like something that's like, oh, everything is so new with the witchcraft and the witches, but it's a very like satisfying witch tale to me, especially because as you said, like it's very playful. Like it was coming out during October, so I think it was just like the perfect like kind of Halloween spooky fun show for the season, at least for me.
Yeah.
I thought it was really great, and it definitely made me want to watch more like witch shows and like find more witch stuff.
Yeah. As far as the horror elements go, so we have the Salem Seven who are stalking Agatha. They're very, very horror villainy.
Yeah.
You have Aubrey Plaza's character,
Yes.
Rio, who ends up literally being death.
Yeah.
And she is very horror, very
Yeah.
like skeletal. Every time she kind of reminds me out of like the Haunted Mansion or
I
something.
loved her look. They show like half of her face is like a skeleton,
Yeah.
like a skull underneath, and it looks so cool. And yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's that. And then some of the trials have like some horror aspects
Sure.
to
The
it as
Witch's Road
well.
itself is just straight
Yeah.
out of a horror film.
But there is a playfulness to it, but there are times when it's like darker
Yeah, and there's
for
like,
sure. Like
people
there's
are turning into
deaths and
zombies and
yeah.
like, yeah.
So there's a lot of that to it. Like it's definitely got some horror to it. It's a
Absolutely.
family friendly horror though, for sure. It's not anything that's like gory or
No.
like super intense as far as that goes. Like we're rewatching it with the kids right now. But I think it's really well done family friendly horror
Yeah.
personally.
Yeah.
Because sometimes like we've watched a few movies this year that are family, PG 13, whatever, and they just are so lame when it comes to the horror aspects. And I didn't feel that way at all with this.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's also one character that we didn't even really talk about. One of the witches. I think her last name is Caledru. Caledru.
Yeah.
She's the
Lila.
she's
Lily. Lila.
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 I
How
don't
do
know
you
how
say
I
it?
don't know her name, but she's the like
Patty Lupin.
yeah, she's
Yeah.
like the seer, like the psychic or whatever.
Mm.
And everything with her
Divination.
arc, yeah, I loved that. That was aside from Agatha, her story was probably my favorite because I thought that was so cool. There's some like time travel stuff going on that's very satisfying like when you get to the conclusion of everything to
It's like
see like things
looping.
yeah see
Yeah.
things tie up and just like from her perspective and just like the idea of what she's going through like essentially she can like see different parts of her life out of order and
Yeah.
that's like super cool to me like how it ends up just ending and I loved all of that I guess maybe my only like it's not really a criticism, but like I would have liked to see more of some of the witches because like there are deaths that happen like really quickly.
Oh yeah, Miss Hart.
His heart dies like really fast, and that made
Yeah.
me really sad. It was very unexpected. But I also think that this season ends with like a possibility of a second season or even like another spinoff,
Yeah.
which I hope is something that happens because where it ends, I'm like really interested in like more. Like I would love to watch more about the two characters that it ends with.
I think it's
So,
I think it's definitely possible. I don't think about a second season per se,
but like a
but
spin-off.
more something added to the events after this.
Mm.
Something to do with Wanda.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
For sure, yeah.
because obviously Billy's looking for Tommy
Hmm.
and ultimately Wanda, who was said to be dead after the events of Doctor Strange, but I highly doubt that the Scarlet Witch isn't going to die easily.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think that you know you'll probably see something in the way of a sequel down the road, whatever way that presents itself. I don't know.
Hmm.
Remains to be seen on what the plans are because the show started as does anything female centric in the MCU. Hate to point it out, but it's just the truth. Whether it's the Marvels or Captain Marvel or Black Widow or WandaVision, or it doesn't really matter if it has a female lead, it doesn't track very well in the
Mm.
beginning, or at all ever. It doesn't really matter what the quality of it is. And this was one of those shows. She Hulk obviously had that problem as
Mm.
well. So they're always the lowest rated things in the MCU, which is it's frustrating for sure. But this one, it didn't do well at first, but as the show continued, especially around like episode 6, I want to say, where we get the Billy episode where
Mm.
we get back on his backstory and we see what happened to him. Um, that is where I think that the people who stuck around, at least, like the show has really, really high ratings after that, right?
Mm.
Like the last couple episodes are in the nines, right? Which with these shows, they typically don't recover with the audience. So I think the
Mm.
quality is strong enough and the revelations are good enough that it's actually pulling at least the people who stuck around. Because a lot of people love to just stick around to be
To
negative.
like hate on it, yeah.
But with this one, it's seemingly been able to overcome
Mm.
that negativity. So I think that this did end in a positive light, and it always matters how it ends. Like you can start really strong, but if you end poorly,
Right.
people remember things negatively. I mean, look at Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
That was like the most popular show on earth. Everyone loved it, and
Yeah.
because it had one season that everyone was mad about. Now, whenever it's brought up, everyone's like, "Oh, like negative
Right.
towards the show."
Yeah.
So the fact that this show ended positively, I think it bodes well for its future.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so it's a big shame that Agatha Harkness seemingly is dead, and is a ghost now.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I think we're gonna go into some Billy Wiccan uh, centric story,
I'm down for that.
and Agatha's gonna really just be there
Kind of like
as
a
like an angel on
sidekick.
his shoulder
Yeah.
kind of thing, which is
Yeah.
a shame because Agatha is a horrible person.
She's such a like she to me is really how you do that like morally gray or not even she's not morally gray, but like a villainous character that you
She's an
like
anti-hero.
hate, but you also really love her because
Yeah.
she has so many moments of like a spark of humanity or kindness or like empathy, and then especially when you get like her backstory and stuff, like I think you really come to feel for her. But then she's also very like ruthless and cold and very selfish as well. So I mean she kills a lot of people, like a lot, and
Oh my
she
god,
lets a lot
so
of people
many.
die too. So there's a lot of stuff with her character that I think make her like really complex, and I love that.
She doesn't
And
just kill people though, she betrays them.
right. Yeah,
That's what's
exactly.
even more
Yeah.
villainous,
Yeah.
right? Like she takes a bunch of witches in throughout the centuries and she convinces them that she's there to help them
Yeah.
and that they're there to help her and that there's this kind of like communal
Yeah.
experience of like witches uh joining forces and
Right.
banding together, and it's all a big ploy to steal their power to keep alive forever. And that's all this ends up being. But Billy's there to throw a wrench into the gears and create an actual witch's road. This is all a big ploy from the beginning. She does this to people every
Yeah.
time she's like loses her power or is getting old or whatever. She then lures people in, convinces them that they can do this stuff. The song was created by her kid,
Yeah.
as just kind of like a fun little jingle that they sang together. So there's like a huge emotional weight that comes along with the song.
Well, but more than that, like she gets her kid involved in the
Oh
con
my God,
because that's what
terrible.
the song evolves into is like she creates this fable
And the
of
kid's
the
the moral
witch's
center,
road.
right?
Yeah.
Like he's the one that's
Yeah.
like, I don't.
But, and then there's all this like story about her like trading her son for the dark hold, right? And all this. And like when you come to find out like what actually happens, and that's kind of what I'm meaning, where it's like it's really tragic and she's doesn't start off as, I mean, she does start off pretty bad, but like I don't know. She's bad, but she just has all these moments throughout that you're like, oh, you could be good. Like you could change your ways, but she doesn't. So she remains kind of a very, like you said, like an anti-hero. She's not a good person. She's a bad person, but she has like some good qualities to
This is the
her.
power of charisma. Okay,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
really take note of this. Like how much you like an individual's personality can really skew your perspective and give someone so many more chances. This is how people get into abusive
Yeah.
relationships. This is how people vote for politicians that are clearly scumbags and con artists,
Yeah.
because they really like somehow have bought into this persona that they're, putting out there for you to latch onto. Because I've listened to you since we've known each other, right? Like with Anakin Skywalker,
Yeah.
because you're so into the brooding, emo bad boy kind of guy that you're willing to look past the fact that he literally murdered younglings, that he blew up a
I wouldn't
planet,
say
that
that
he,
I'm like
and you're
willing
like,
to
oh,
look
he's
past
he's
these.
redeemed
I
because I
just think
like him. And
no, I don't
Agatha
think.
is a monster.
Yeah, I'm not saying that anything excuses like her behavior or like any of these other characters. I'm just saying that it makes them more interesting as
Sure,
a character.
but you
And I
connect
like
with
them
them.
as a
And so,
character,
okay, my
but
point
I
being
don't
is
like
that
support what they do.
you are so much more open to their redemption
I am more hopeful for their redemption,
because you
maybe.
because you like who they
Yeah.
are, right? As opposed to somebody can do something to such a lesser degree,
Yeah.
but if you don't like them,
Yeah.
you have no interest in their
Sure.
redemption.
Yeah, I definitely have more like I would like them to be redeemed. I would like them to have that like come to Jesus moment. But yeah, there's plenty of movies and shows that we've watched where people do like much little, but they're like they don't have any other redeeming qualities to me, or I don't, have that connection of like understanding like some other part of their character that makes me just be like very like dismissive or like no, I don't care. Like I want them to die.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, no, I'm not denying it. I think that Agatha's a very charismatic character and she is very manipulative. And that's part of it. And I think that, yeah, she kind of does manipulate the audience as well. Um, but, like overall, I just think it's such a great show. And I just had such a fun time watching it. I'm really happy that we're rewatching it with the girls. And it makes me want to rewatch WandaVision a little bit too, because I also really enjoyed that show. And yeah.
Yeah, we have. Which was your favorite of the trials?
Um, I really well, I don't know. There's a lot, they're all really fun. I really liked the tarot one
Me
at
too.
the end
Yeah,
because
that's my
like I
favorite.
said, that's like, I love her character in that arc. And it's like a really cool concept. There's all these knives dropping down.
Yeah,
Um, I liked the 80s like Ouija board one though. Just
sure.
because it was like fun and like hokey. And then the very first trial that we got to, where their faces like they drink like a poison essentially, and their faces all like swell up initially,
Yeah,
like really bad plastic surgery or something. That was like funny to me, but yeah, I don't know. They were all pretty cool. I like that they were all so different. There's such variety to them.
yeah. The deaths of characters were pretty surprising at the
They
time.
were. They were very like.
Mrs. Hart's death was like shocking
I
in the
was
moment.
convinced that she wasn't
She's coming
dead.
back,
I was
yeah.
like, she's got to come
And then when
back.
she started crawling out of her grave, you're like, oh, there she is, and it's like, no, that's Aubrey Plaza's character now,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh shit, like
Yeah.
we're definitely playing for keeps here.
Mm-hmm.
And each one of them like dies except for Jennifer is able to survive and dig her way out
Yeah.
of Westview. Literally at the outskirts, the
Yeah.
city limits, she's able to like escape
Yeah.
the enchantment that Billy had cast, much like his
Mm-hmm.
mother, over the town. Whether he turned Westview into the Witch's Road, and all those people were living under that projection again because they all had to live through it through WandaVision. These poor fucking people. Can you
I
just
know.
let them
They should
like
just
get back to their
move.
life?
They should just leave.
But yeah, I think probably the best aspect of the show outside of like Catherine Hahn just being fucking amazing and
Yeah.
hot as hell and funny and just so cool, and
Yeah.
she's just so likable
Oh,
in
so
every
likable.
way.
Yeah.
Even she
Even
that's
knowing how awful.
that shows you like charisma. Just it really does like it's hard to not like someone no matter what they're doing, right? Because she's so likable
Hmm.
in even her evil,
Yes.
right? Like when she's doing bad things, it's still somewhat like um alluring
Yeah.
because of how she presents it, like the sarcasm and
Yeah.
like she's very very manipulatively appealing,
Mm-hmm.
which is why she plays that character so perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the outside of her, I think the crowning achievement of the show, the most noteworthy aspect of the show, is the set designs.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. As I was saying, like it's got such a theatricality to it. Like it's very stage like,
Yeah,
but in the best way.
yeah,
And yeah, all the sets for all the trials are completely different. The Witch's Road looks great.
yeah,
All of it just looks so cool.
yeah. It's it's a dark Wizard of Oz, Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah, very fairy tale.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. It
Mm-hmm.
was great.
So yeah. Anyway, we'll see where this ends up going.
Yeah.
Um, now that Billy Maximoff is off to find Tommy and potentially the Scarlet Witch, and he has Agatha Harkness in tow,
Yeah.
Ghost Harkness, who is a fast study, a quick study, as she says, because
Mm-hmm.
she's able to go from being more of a
Corporeal.
non-corporeal
Yeah.
entity, and now she's able to be like more of like a poltergeist,
Yeah.
where she can actually manipulate objects, which she does very quickly. So I feel like her powers are going to increase,
Mm-hmm.
and she's going to be able to piggyback off of death in a way where maybe they can join forces and become like the dynamic duo of death.
Mm.
I think her villainous days have just begun.
Yeah. I think she's probably still going to get up to a lot of trouble.
Yeah,
I
she's
think she's
not.
going to be a really bad influence on Billy. I'll
Yeah,
tell you that much.
she's not
I
trustworthy.
definitely don't think that she's the best person for him to be hanging around with. But he also already kind of blames himself for everything, because it's like his fault. So I think he's going to go down an interesting path with her, and we'll see what happens.
Another wonderful thing that Marvel does that a lot of the old like the 2000s comic book shows steered away from is they love to embrace kind of this silliness, but like they're able to pull it off in the aesthetic
Mm.
like accuracy with
Costumes
like
and stuff.
Wiccan's costume
Yeah.
being
Oh, it
very
looks
comic
so
accurate.
cool. His
Seeing
outfit was
Scarlet
great.
Witch in kind of comic accuracy,
Yeah.
whether it's the new one that they created or the like Halloween costume
Yeah.
that she wears in WandaVision when she
Mm-hmm.
looks like straight out of the comics. Obviously, Wolverine puts on the mask, and Deadpool and Wolverine and the iconic costume that we've always wanted to see him in, and the
Mm-hmm.
old X-Men movies, like we're trying to put him in like black leather and
Right.
like make
Yeah.
him cool, and it's like comic books are fucking silly,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like
Well,
you got to embrace the
there's
silliness.
an absurdity to superheroes for
Yes.
sure, and that's part of the appeal. but it's a lot easier for most people to do it when they're like when it is a comic versus like live action. But yeah, I think Marvel does a good job at balancing that because yeah, it's a different. It's supposed to be not in our universe. It's a different. It's the Marvel universe. Like they wear the weird costumes and they do
Yeah.
that stuff. Like that's fine.
Embrace the silliness.
Yeah.
And speaking of on the opposite end of the spectrum of that, this actually starts as like a police procedural
Yeah.
detective murder mystery show where she's like this hardened police detective, and that's
Yeah.
like the world that she's been stuck in, which is like the opposite, right? She's like the gruff hero
Right.
who's like trying to solve murders when she's the murderer who never takes anything seriously. So to see like the world she'd been living in and you know, put in by Wanda is really cool to see. When she like goes to like get in her car, and it's just like she's been
It's
sitting
like a
in her living
desk.
room
Yeah.
and pretending to drive to the crime scenes and whatnot. And she's been kind of just living in her head, and people in Westview kind of just watch her walk around
Yeah.
and act these ways. And she's just like,
Yeah,
that's
that's
really funny to me. And everyone there is like aware of what happened to them,
100%.
and it's
Yeah.
like, oh my god, like, is this going to happen to us again? The fact that
Right.
they haven't left
Oh my god. I
is,
would have been out of there so
these are like
fast.
people who live in Tornado Alley and their
Yeah.
house keeps getting hit by tornadoes, and they're just like, man, really sucks to live here.
This is that.
It's like, move
Yeah, this is the Marvel like
equivalent.
equivalent and like that mentality of like, well, we live in a world with superheroes, so it's like
Where am
where
I
could
gonna
I go?
go?
Like Ant-Man might show up in my next neighborhood or something and like,
Yeah,
you know. So,
yeah,
but yeah, I mean once you watch WandaVision, you're like, I don't know though. That's kind of like that's a different
that's
level. That's not
hardcore.
just like some destruction to property and
Yeah,
like people dying. That's like very evil.
yeah, it's intense for
So
sure. Definitely, if you live in Westview, listen up. If you are currently
move.
watching this from
Consider
Westview,
leaving.
don't go to Eastview. Get out of town.
Feel
Go
like
north
yeah,
and view a new world somewhere far away from Westview.
yeah. Like
Terrible.
maybe yeah, yeah. Anyway,
Anyway,
great show.
yes. So if you for some reason haven't seen it and you're wondering, and if you hated WandaVision, then I would think that this might not be for you. But if you wanted
Yeah.
it to be more witchy, this is definitely that. I mean, the last thing I'll say on it, because this is where the show ends, um, and this is another like nod to like how much I really liked the witchiness of it. One thing I really loved about the show was its end credits
Oh
when they're
yeah,
showing like,
yeah.
you know,
End
stuff
credits
from
were
The
great.
Craft, and like
All these
Lisa
different
Simpson is the,
yeah.
and then a lot
It's
of like
just
different footage and pictures of it, witches and witch
yeah,
lore,
like
and
pop culture
yeah,
witches and also like real witch stuff,
yeah,
which is so great because like yeah, I mean witchcraft and like witches are so interesting and
yes,
how like not only in the real life like you know whether we're talking about like witch burnings and witch hunts and
ugh,
like that stuff or like
yeah,
you know people who actually do practice witchcraft and like forms of paganism and such to like how they get translated into the pop culture and yeah all that stuff is super fascinating and this shows it's great there's some really cool yeah really cool stuff in the credits.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is another win for the MCU for me, but you have to remember the only thing in the MCU that I've ever disliked outright was Secret Wars, which I think is not Secret Wars, Secret
Secret
Invasion.
Invasion.
Sorry, Secret Wars is coming out. Secret Invasion, which I think is the only thing in the MCU you have not watched.
Right I
I
didn't
think
watch that with
I
you.
had you skip that because I started watching it because we just couldn't get to it in time, and I
Yeah.
always watch Marvel shows when they come out. We were doing stuff and we couldn't get to it, and I watched the first episode and was thinking like, oh, maybe I'll get this to Kaylee. But the more I watched it from week to week, I was like, this is the most boring, pointless fucking
Yeah.
show ever.
I'm glad I skipped it.
It's crazy to me that like She-Hulk and the Marvels and all of these projects that people like really hated on, and the internet blew up, and then their ratings were like in the threes and stuff like that. Of all the shit that they've done, Secret Invasion is by far and away the worst thing they've ever done,
Yeah.
in my opinion. And I feel like, yeah, people who watched it didn't care for it, but they did not freak out like they did with
Right.
like She-Hulk.
Yeah.
You know,
She-Hulk
like
was
when
really
She-Hulk was like
entertaining.
doing the Megan the Stallion
Yeah. like
twerking or
dance
whatever
and
the hell.
stuff.
Uh, that blew the internet apart. Like
It's
that
so funny.
ended the internet.
It
And
was
like,
so funny.
I love She-Hulk. I thought it was so
Yeah,
fun,
we
so
had a great time
funny.
with it.
It was like such a good, fun show. I think the chick who plays She-Hulk, I forget how to say her name, Tatiana, something with an M.
She was great.
I think she's fantastic.
Yeah,
Like I hope to see her again.
yeah.
I had such a good time with that show. And people who hate on the MCU, I mean, get in line.
I
So
mean,
many people
yeah,
love to
it's
hate on the MCU now.
the thing with the MCU is like
But
there's so like I was saying, like I feel like there's so many different types of like
not everything has to be for you.
no, but that's
Yeah,
what I mean. Like there
yeah,
are those stories. There are so many different types of heroes and like personalities and stuff. Like if you want a really stereotypical like white man hero, you know, you have freaking Captain America or whatever. Like
yeah,
you just have all these different options and I think that's what's great about it. Like you don't have to watch all of it. You don't have to like all of it
yeah,
and that's okay. Like it's not a big deal.
yeah,
It doesn't take away from the stuff you do like.
yeah. So,
So, but this one was great. So, it's a big recommendation from us if you are into the horror and liked WandaVision
yeah.
or interested in it. So,
Okay. Well, we'll see in the comments. Let us know what you think, and join the cult and hate on the MCU like everyone else. I don't really give a fuck. We enjoyed this.
yeah, we did.
Okay.